afternoon, Your Highnesses, Excellencies and Dignitaries, members of the ABLF network, and all of our wonderful guests today. My name is Resham Katecha. I'm a policy and strategy specialist based in the UK, and as ever, I am delighted to be here at the ABLF City. I have a fascinating speaker who's going to share his insights with you. Ben Ampen is Twitter's Managing Director for the Middle East and North Africa and is responsible for growing the business across the region. Since joining Twitter in 2012, he has successfully launched the company's sales activities in France, Spain, the Netherlands, Germany, and Italy. In 2015, he moved to the UAE as the head of revenue, leading the growth and revenue performance for the country in the Middle East and North African region. He has previous experience at Google, so I'm sure he will have lots of insights to share with us about the tech world and corporate life. So Ben, thank you so much for being with us today. Can you give us your insights and advice on how business leaders can prepare themselves to lead organizations in an increasingly volatile, uncertain, and complex world?
Okay, we're jumping straight in. Love that. Hi, everyone. I'm very, very honored to be here today. Thank you, Resham, for the introduction. And let's go straight into it. By the way, you can follow me on Twitter at Ampen. And if there's any question after the session you have, I'll be more than happy to answer. So back to your question, Resham. How can leaders prepare themselves to lead organization in such a context? Globally, we are witnessing a tumultuous period. It is a fact. In my opinion, a wider reflection needs to be placed on how companies organize their workforce. This concept of organization is important, I think, because the environment within which we operate is frequently beyond our control. So as such, as business leader, I think it is paramount to place focus on the areas we can control. This is something I've been repeating a lot to the team in the past 12 months, focus on what you can control. And when I say that, it's not just all teams, this is also mental and physical health, and how we adapt to change. A fantastic example of leadership through change and uncertainty is Ernest Shackleton and his Antarctic expedition. I don't know if you've ever heard about it or read about it, but although his expedition was a failure, his ability to adapt to the circumstances brought about by unforeseen challenges and his commitment to the new goal, the way he adapted basically, his new goal was survival, all of that was demonstrative to his true leadership. So although it had nothing to do with the world of business and that took place at the beginning of the 20th century, to me, it remains an inspiration for leaders today and in the years to come. And by the way, for the leaders in attendance today who are interested, this is a Harvard Business Review case study. So if you check Ernest Shackleton, you could definitely see that. So that would be overall my first way of answering your question, is focusing on what we can control. In your question, though, you mentioned very important words: volatile, uncertain, and complex. Usually, businesses and leaders, when they talk about these words, they add the word ambiguity, and they compose the catch-all VUCA acronym. I'm sure you've already heard about it. So there's no question today we are in a VUCA environment. So volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That being said, although we could spend the whole session talking about that, I believe it's important to recognize that each term describes something particular and requires a different approach. Something I personally found useful to navigate this concept is asking yourself two questions. The first one is, how well can you predict the results of your actions? And the second one is, how much do you know about the situation? For example, if your answers to these questions are negative to both, you are in the territory of ambiguity. And I think that's where we were for the past 12 months. So in other words, you are in a situation where it is a never seen before. In that case specifically, your approach should revolve around experimenting, building hypotheses, testing them, and applied learning. Apply this learning at scale if possible. So this is really a learning and iterate process. Does that make sense?
Oh, total sense. Thank you. And I love the questions there. So speaking about VUCA, speaking about, you talked about adaptation. Can you give us some examples of how you in your role at Twitter have adapted to the ambiguity and the challenges of the last 12 months?
Sure. So it's very interesting you ask this question, because when it comes to adapting to what we did, I think the role of a leader per se didn't evolve that much. You know, that was really a collective effort to make sure that we were adapting to the situation, as an organization. So the very first thing I've adapted on, I think, was around empathy. I think in the past 12 months, whether it was on a professional or on a personal level, the key principles that has guided our response at Twitter is to lead with empathy and flexibility. To give you concrete examples, we introduced resources to help managers prioritize their own well-being while managing a team, and also fostering deeper empathy between manager and their direct reports. So it was really important for us, all in all, to allow employees to make room to operate at reduced capacity when needed, because we recognized that the needs were drastically changing. So that's the first thing, you know, empathy. The second thing that we tried to do at Twitter, and I'll give you an example of measures, was around mental health. Mm-hmm. We realized that prioritizing mental health over anything else was crucial. So I personally think that mental health is the foundation of physical health, but also strong decision making, which is super important to all the leaders in our team. So as an organization at Twitter, we have increased our investment in making sure we were providing even more mental and physical health benefits. And we also explored ways to better support caregivers learning to navigate on your reality. So, you know, if you zoom out and look at the big picture, I truly hope that such a conscious type of leadership will be relied on for the years to come. This is not just for a period of crisis, a period of hard changes, because empathy and mental health, they have continuously demonstrated themselves to be the necessary elements to not only a more balanced economic development, but more sustainable and more fulfilling economic development. So those 2 points for us at Twitter, and through the measure we put in place, are the things that helped us at least lead the way to recovery.
Sounds like a great place to work in a crisis. So as a leader yourself, with social distancing and working from home measures still being the norm, what's your advice on how leaders should manage the crucial element of human connection within their organizations?
I wish I knew the exact answer. You know, this is something when I meet some of my counterparts, when I talk to everyone in my team, always asking this question. This concept of human connection is extremely important, and I think we can think about it at different levels. So first, the thing I'd like to share with all the leaders and all the people with us today is, although the role of the leader is crucial here, I genuinely believe the topic of human connection is the responsibility of every individual in the organization. So back to the work from home and social distancing. So naturally, these circumstances present their own set of challenges, such as supporting parents who are helping their children with e-learning, other people creating a dedicated at-home office, developing a daily routine that provides a clear distinction between your personal and your professional responsibility, and all of that while maintaining bonds, social bonds between teammates. So generally speaking, we have allowed our team members to have the flexibility they need, especially for parents grappling with virtual schooling. Our global Twitter Parents Business Resource Group, this is a group of employees, you can join it voluntarily. This group has developed guidelines for parents to cope during this unprecedented time, mainly around providing children a daily structure, but also keeping the activity fairly independent and low energy. So the general tip we giving parents is to set a schedule and block time in their calendars as necessary to be with their kids. And it's also super important to communicate about it to the rest of the team. So for leaders who are parents, it's necessary that they lead by example. If on the one hand, you're asking people to block time and communicate clearly about it, if you're in the situation, you also have to do that. We've also provided a lot of work from home best practices, but it's really voluntary that I'm answering your question here, not directly jumping into the very concept of human connection, because I think the way people are engaging and are making their own human connection at home evolving is the first part of the answer to this question. As for focusing on maintaining a social bond between teammates, we have a group, actually, Nina, in our office in Dubai, we have a group called the Wellness Committee. That's a group of volunteers amongst our employees. They've been getting creative with virtual meetings to boost morale. So what they've done is they've been hosting weekly virtual meetup for employees to discuss different topics, such as gaming, fitness. There was one around parenting, obviously, and another one was about cooking. And one important point here is these are not mandatory. Even before COVID-19, I always cringe when I see this notion of organized fun. Oh, the leader has to sustain the culture. Let's organize an hour where we have fun. No, it's even more the case here today. Being genuine is so important. So make sure that the teams can gather around themes that really matter to them. And we also are encouraging the team members to use telephone or video conferencing tools for social and non-work-related hangouts. So look, there's no doubt that it has been a big change for all of us. However, when it comes to Twitter specifically, as an organization, we were already moving toward a more distributed workforce that's increasingly remote. So let's just acknowledge here that COVID-19 was probably an accelerator of something, a trend that we already saw. Twitter is a global service, and the company is committed to enabling anyone, anywhere, to work at Twitter. So it's important to note that some of these resources that we've been sharing were implemented before COVID-19. So just to finish on this, on the topic of managing human connection for leaders, I think, and that's the last bit on how I would answer this question about human connection. I think as leader, to be even better at managing human connection, we also have to think about the concept of vulnerability. Vulnerability of all of us as leader. That's another topic we could spend hours. Maybe there'll be questions around that. And by the way, I invite all of you, if you haven't seen it, to watch Dr. Brené Brown's talk on the power of vulnerability. That's something you can find easily online. Brené Brown, the power of vulnerability. This is an amazing resource for your team and leaders to get better at that. So personally, I think the past year has taught us something beautiful concerning being better as a leader at managing human connection. Bringing more humanity into the mix definitely helps building our resilience and the resilience of our teams, hence the resilience of our business.
Which world leaders have inspired you, or corporate leaders have inspired you with the way they've handled and led their countries or their organizations during the pandemic? Is there anyone or any group of people that you think that's the way we should be?
That's going to sound extremely corporate, but my first answer was going to be Jack Dorsey, our co-founder and CEO. But look, I've been at Twitter for more than 8 years, and the reason why I said Jack is because at the beginning of the pandemic, you had a lot of companies saying we have to put people first, we have to invest in our employees, protect them, and everything. I don't know about the details of what other companies did. What I know is here at Twitter, we definitely walk the talk. When I see all the measures that were put in place, when I was able and empowered as a leader to tell my managers, go to the team and tell them that you have to focus first on their mental health, this is something that I found extremely inspiring. If you think about other a company, other leaders, again, I wouldn't like to speak about companies that I don't know perfectly, but I remember Airbnb went through a difficult time, if I remember correctly, in the past month. And the way that their CEO openly communicated to the world, explaining why some people had to leave the company and who were these people and what their skills were to make sure that they were supported even in the tough times, well, I think something pretty exemplary.
Of course. And seeing as you've picked Twitter as an example, social media defines the narrative in almost every aspect, whether we're talking private life, public life, international life. What do you think a leader's approach should be towards his or her ability to influence large audiences?
Specifically online, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we're not too far from what we're talking about today. When we talk about resilience, I mentioned vulnerability earlier. I think I used the adjective genuine earlier as well. All of these traits are traits that are not only necessary for leaders today, they have always been traits of successful leadership, but even more visible when they are displayed correctly today. When you have a leader on Twitter that goes to its potential clients, customers, partners, and openly ask questions, openly react to good or bad news, this is a sign that this person can be trusted. So that's why more and more on Twitter, we are seeing leaders from the business world, but also from the public world, and the UAE does a fantastic job at this. Obviously, our ruler is the best example of this, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, that is using Twitter a lot. This is only on Twitter that you can see that a government reshuffle can be announced, right? But back to the private sector, you can also see leaders that are using this platform, in particular Twitter, to ask for feedback, to communicate, to be as close as possible to their partners or their clients. So I would just, as advice, and we have a great initiative here in the region called Leaders for Good, where we're bringing some leaders to not just talk about their business, but about the topics that matter to them, the causes that their business are fighting for beyond the usual business. I think, having a genuine voice, not being afraid of saying, I don't know, and making sure that you create a dialogue. If you ask a question, make sure you read the answer and sometimes you react to them. I think this is a very good way for leaders to be present on platforms digitally like Twitter today.
And of course, social media platforms, including Twitter, have helped us in many ways to expand democracy and to increase access of communications to people who might not have otherwise been able to reach out. You can easily tweet your president or your prime minister or the leader of a corporation in a way that you couldn't communicate with them in the past. But of course, the downside or the challenges with that easy access to spreading communication is the misinformation and the fake news that has become a major cause for worry. What challenges did you face around misinformation during the pandemic, and how did you address them?
Thank you for the question. So what we did is locally, at least here in the region, we worked with knowledgeable and a credible source of information when it came to explaining what to do. So we did that in the UAE, we did that in Egypt. It was really important when it came to Twitter, especially in the first months of the pandemic. You basically had the prompt taking you directly to the right platforms with the resources about the pandemic. So that is something that was put on the top of our priority list, simply because even before the pandemic, one of the top priorities of Twitter has been what we call the health of the conversation. We want to make sure that anyone that comes to Twitter yesterday, today, or tomorrow, whatever information they see on it, this is information that is credible and coming from a source that you would believe. So we have COVID was actually a perfect, sorry, I shouldn't say that, but COVID was an interesting playground to try all of these new measures. So that's what we did through prompts or collaboration with, like I said, credible sources, and around the political conversation and elections. We've done a lot of work as well, making sure that we were reducing as much as possible spammy behavior.
And so obviously you had to deal with this significant and unprecedented challenge. What's your advice to leaders on how they can sustain the balance between the business's current scenario and preparing for hopefully a more secure and consolidated future?
You mean really finding the balance between these two, like thinking of taking care of what we talk about today, like the teams, the business, it's difficult, but also making sure that we're ready when the crisis is behind us?
Yeah, how did you do that? What's your advice around that, finding that balance?
So before I start answering the very question about leaders, I just want to say that I think building this muscle is, again, a collective effort. Everyone in the team has a role to play to find this balance. This year, 2021 will be more important than ever for leaders to take on the challenge by demonstrating several key qualities: agility, interactivity, efficiency, and safety. As we continue to assess the benefit of working from home and also any gaps that we can address, I think leaders really have to constantly ask themselves the question around agility, because we always have to adapt to this new environment. Let me give you an example of Twitter directly. So an additional step that Twitter has taken in future-proofing all decisions is gathering feedback from employees through a global employee survey, so that this survey helped us determine what action needed to be deployed or need to be deployed in the future at the company level in order to make sure we continue to support all our employees as best as possible, but at the same time, recognizing that we have to keep on being seen and being a company innovating and growing our business. So I don't think, more generally, even beyond Twitter, I don't think you'll be surprised to hear that from someone working at Twitter, but I believe digital transformation remains a core imperative, and it goes beyond the media industry. The digital transformation will be successful if a strong focus is placed on implementation and design. In 2021, companies will have to think about scenarios involving vaccine, no vaccine, lockdown, no lockdown, travel, no travel. So as a consequence, companies need to perfect their processes that will enable data-driven decision so that they can really be able to identify and seize an opportunity or be able to pivot when needed, all of that as quickly as possible. So, I think there are many things from a pure logistic and tactical standpoint, but another thing that is pretty important is the mindset and how you do that and how you include people in that. So when it comes to the mindset, there's a concept called a growth mindset that is, and happy to talk about that later on. I think it's a key trait that leaders, especially in such turbulent times, need to have. But a growth mindset will enable you to constantly ask yourself questions and try to adapt your ways to whatever is thrown at you. So not only you need to have this growth mindset, I think to be able to find this right balance, inclusion will be more important than ever. Without inclusion, I think we miss out on the opportunity to grow in our leadership. What I mean by inclusion here is making sure every employee is aligned on what we're trying to achieve. And to make sure that everyone is aligned, it's not enough to send an email to say this is our new strategy, this is our new direction. We have to make sure that all employees feel like they are part of they're in the same boat. And what we've done at Twitter is we have a number, I mentioned the parents one, but we have a number of global business resource group that are led by employees. And this group, they serve as representation for the diverse communities within the organization while championing an inclusive and diverse workforce. So look, I'm sorry, I realize my answer is pretty long and I'm conscious of time here, but I think leading by example to showcase the concept of we all in it together. I used the metaphor of a boat. This is not just a nice thing to do. This is a necessity for long-term successful business. So it reminds me actually, and I promise I'll finish with that. It's a personal anecdote to illustrate this point. That was several years ago. Someone in my team that was part of the yearly yearly review of your performance, and someone that reports to me, super smart, great person, real analytical, everything, just put a little thing in my review saying that I remember this moment. That was a regular day at work for me at the end of a busy week, late in the evening. And this person mentioned the fact that I offered to help the team with the most mundane and basic task that any junior executive could have delivered. And I did that simply because I knew the team had a challenging week, everyone was tired, and I could immediately add value. It wasn't a special moment at all that day, but unconsciously, I sent a message to the team. Yeah, I sent a message that I'd be there for them, and irrespective of role or titles, we were in it all together. So that's a key takeaway for leaders today. Like, if we want to continue succeeding, growing, standing back after such a crisis, everyone in the team, irrespective of their seniority, level, or role, must have an equal voice.
Wow, what a great takeaway. And what do you think, as we're starting to get vaccines and we're starting to emerge, what do you see as the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge for Twitter in the next year or two?
For Twitter?
For Twitter, yes. Or for you specifically as a leader?
Okay. So as a leader, so let me start with Twitter. We are in a position where today Twitter is what's happening in the world. We are, and that's the vision for the company, is we want to be the conversational layer of the internet. You can see that usage of online platform has grown a lot in the past months. We want to make sure that we create a place where people feel safe and find value every time they come on Twitter. So this context where digitalization has increased a lot, where people are more and more on their phones, is basically something that plays in our favor. That doesn't mean that we should rest on our laurels. So we want to make sure that we bringing more and more innovation to the market when it comes to the advertisers and the business partner we work with. We want to make sure that their advertising campaign work, the return on investment is high. On the consumer side, we want to make sure that whenever you come to Twitter, you open Twitter, whether it's for 5 minutes or 25 minutes, you learn something. So there are plenty of things that we're doing here, experimenting with voice, as you may have seen recently. So that's on the platform side. When it comes to my team and myself personally, I talked about that today, but I really believe that's the case, is how we learn to basically be more human in the past 12 months. Look, right now, I don't know exactly how many people are watching that, but welcome to my living room. Everyone is my living room right now. So in terms of, intimacy and vulnerability, there is something happening here. So you may not be seeing this person according to their title or what they do in any company. You basically get to know the person a bit more. Can it help business? I personally think so. In the past 12 months, I've learned things about business partners, about clients, about people working in this ecosystem I had never known in all these years, and it has basically helped us do a better business. So that's why I mentioned as well several times today that this is not just a role of a leader here. The leader role is to inspire all the teams to build this muscle all together.
Amazing. And then one 30-second question, I'll be cheeky and sneak it in there. As leader in one of the most influential social media platforms in the world, what do you think the role of traditional media will be in the years to come?
Can I ask you to tell me exactly what you mean by traditional media, or should I assume it's TV, outdoor, radio, newspaper?
Exactly that.
Okay, all of that. Look, all of these media are here to stay for a while. That was yesterday, I believe there was a Super Bowl happening in the US. This is a big moment in America and for some people around the world. You should have seen the level of conversation on Twitter. And look, this is happening on TV and Twitter at the same time. At the same time, on digital, you can have access to a big pool of people when you ask questions as a leader or as a company representative. So I think there will be still a lot of collaboration and crossroads where traditional media and platforms like Twitter are collaborating, but more and more, again, because there are many more people on their mobile phones, you'll see new ways of using digital media. And that's the case with voice, that's the case with video, and hopefully that's the case that anytime someone wants to discuss something in the world on any given day, they come to Twitter for this, because this is where they find credible information and they feel safe to do so.
And if the audience and I could have it our way, we would keep you on for many, many hours and pick your brains about vulnerability and some of the other fascinating topics you've shared. But sadly, our time has come to an end. If you have enjoyed the session, you can rewind and watch it again through the platform. If you missed the beginning, you can do the same. If you are commenting on social media, especially on Twitter, make sure you use the hashtag ABLFCity so that Ben knows we're using his platform. And thank you so much, Ben, for your brilliant insights. Thank you to everybody in the audience for joining us today. And remember that we are back every month featuring global leaders in powerful conversations.